Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. And as always, folks, here at Locked On Seminoles, we're back once again with another edition of our mandatory Mailbag Monday to kick off your work week. And folks, we're going to be addressing the hype train, heading down over and making a little bit of a pit stop down at the University of Coral Gables. Then we'll discuss the recruiting strategy that FSU staff is implementing as a whole and how we as a fan base should feel about it. And then we're going to end up discussing the Mike Martin Jr. departure, firing, and what it means for FSU baseball moving forward. But with that being said, let's go on with the show.
Are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, folks, welcome to Locked On Seminoles. I'm your host, Max, and with me, I have Andre Silva. Collectively, we've been covering the team for about 4 years now. I've been a season ticket holder / booster, whether I was giving the money, my family, we don't need to split those hairs, since 1992. Drake has been a longtime fan for over a decade now, and we bring you your favorite daily Florida State sports talk show every single day. Except for this month and next month, we're pretty much going to be 3 days a week because it's the off season. But you already know what it is. If you've been here before and you're not subscribed, something brought you back. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If your first time is now, hit the subscription as well. Today is our Mailbag Monday. We've got 5 or 6 questions lined up. And Drake, I think we just need to dive in. What is our first question from the mailbag?
So our first question comes from Chris Cloutier. What's up, my guy? Says, hey, guys, love the show. Chris, thank you very much. Always there. Love to hear good feedback. Can anyone really explain to me why is it that Miami has so much hype compared to us this season? Mario is a first-year head coach at UM. They already have him as a top 3 ACC head coach. He came from the same program as Tag and only has one big win under his belt. I just don't see why we're expected to lose to them this year. I get TVD is good, but there's got to be more to that, right?
So I'm going to answer that question. First of all, again, thank you for the questions, guys. You let us do what we love, and we love you for that. Keep them coming. With a story from this past weekend. My ex and I share a daughter. She'll be 5 in August, and I had her this week. I took her over to her mom's house. I noticed on her mom's phone background was a picture of not my daughter. So I thought, did you have a secret baby that maybe I don't know about? That's fine, but I'm just curious. It was actually her niece who was born like 5 weeks ago. So the point of that story is that my daughter is now reading, basically riding a bike, tells jokes, all these great things she's learned how to do.
Charlie low-key pretty funny.
And her own mother has a brand new baby on the phone background because newer is always more exciting, right? It's just people see this guy who has had some success, right, at a Power 5 program, come down to Miami, a program that, for what, 20 years now, we've been hearing is one step away from getting back. You hear that they have the money commitment. I think, Drake, keep me honest here, but to me, I think it's less about Cristobal and it's more about what the amount of money they gave Cristobal says about the booster commitment to improving the program that people are really hyped about. And then again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would just point people to 2 years ago and 4 years ago. Willie had a ton of hype when he first got here. Even a year ago, right? Was it Midnight Madness? That got a ton of hype.
That was
new.
Good,
is
actually.
Just right. It's new is just always going to be more exciting. That's my take on that.
So one of the things that we discussed on here actually was when Trey Rowland came on, and I was very adamant that Mario Cristobal was going to be the new head coach of Miami. And one of the reasons both you and Trey didn't agree with me was because they never had the financial backing when it came to booster and alumni support, as you alluded to. And now you're seeing actually whether John Ruiz, whether or not, you're following his market share pricing of his big business over there on the stock exchange, which is probably not the best thing to do right now if you're John Ruiz. But overall, you're seeing alumni like himself. You see Dan Lambert that had an ATT. You're seeing businesses actually back Miami, and the financial commitment to Mario Cristobal shows that for the first time, probably since 2001, 2000, they've actually been committed to actually performing well on the field. And that to me is a scary thought. And also with the Tagger thing, you're right. The new car smell effect is a real damn thing. When something is brand new coming in, it's very hot, it's very loud. So overall, I think it's because Cristobal has shown that he's won the Pac-12 twice. I know Dave wants to point to his record as being 62-60. Listen, the man guided FIU to 2 bowl games. FIU is a terrible program, and overall at Oregon, he was 35-13. So he's a good head coach, but it's more showing that I think people are finally seeing Miami finally financially commit to a program and to an institution that they haven't done so in a very long time.
Exactly. I mean, and the last thing I want to touch on is we forget this, I think, but Miami is a private institution. They are, I'm not saying they're doing anything illegal. I'm actually saying the opposite. They're allowed to do a lot of things with money that we can't do. Like, they can make money. If they want to move Miami Health money that they've made off of that over to sports, they're well within their rights to do it, as long as they don't do it with money that was granted to them by the state or the federal government and send that to sports. So, they're operating in a little bit of a different way. And the levers we've seen them pull to expedite their improvement is the reason for the hype. Now, speaking of hype, I do want to get to some more questions. We've got a few in the hopper about recruiting hype and if we're going after the right people. We also have a couple about LSU, and we got to talk about the Mike Martin Jr. firing over the weekend as well. But before that, folks, I want to tell you that if you, like Drake, thought Mario Cristobal was going to be the next head coach, you could have put some money on it and you could have made a little change. And the place to do that would have been betonline.net. It's the best place to put money down on any sporting event you like, whether it's something mainstream like the new LIV Golf League or something a little more off the beaten path like Tuesday afternoon horse racing. We don't judge here, but we will judge you if you use any outlet but betonline.net. So make sure you go to betonline.net and create an account using promo code LOCKEDON to get a 50% welcome bonus when you make your first deposit. So yeah, folks, like we said, the mailbag is your episode. We facilitate what you want to facilitate, may not be the right word, but we talk about what you want to talk about. And feel free to drop questions at any time. We try to respond in writing when we can as well, but we'll still get to it on the air, even if we respond in writing a lot of the time. And just make sure you're subscribed. Like, we love having you here no matter what, but y'all coming back day after day, 3 days a week during the off season. Again, lets us do this every day. And we hope that y'all leave feeling a little smarter about Florida State football from, 2 dudes that have followed the team religiously for a decade each, and have been covering the team for over 2 years. So anyway, Drake, let's get into the next one. Brian Wilkinson has asked questions before, always has some good ones. And he just flat out asks, does it seem like the staff is afraid to try and recruit the big dogs? Are they scared of rejection? Do they not want to look bad by whiffing, or what? And then he also asks, is there a scenario where Mike Norvell is a lame duck coach if LSU blows us out, a la Virginia Tech 2017 or 18, whatever it was, 18. Drake, I'll let you handle that one on recruiting.
So I think it's more the fact that FSU already knows they're not in it for some of the top tier quality 5-star kids, even though I do think it was something to note that Shelton Sampson Jr. was in town this past weekend on an official visit as a 5-star wide receiver, top 30 player in the country. He's also teammates with Ricky Collins. But overall, I think it's more the fact that staff is not going after a majority of them because they just don't see them as attainable. And this is something I think Max can allude to a little bit more when it comes to comparing him to Taggart a few years ago, where that overall, like, you should be able to go after what you think you can get. However, I feel it's more that, in my opinion, I think people they're more afraid of, looking poor, looking bad, because they already know that they actually are not going to have a chance with a lot of these kids. So if there's going to be a whiff, eventually down the line, and you already know what's going to happen, why even attempt to actually go after some of these kids, even though it's kind of circular reasoning where you need to win more games to get better kids, but you need to get better kids to win more games. And that's why recruiting is just it's just a different animal most of the time.
Yeah, it's also such an interesting dynamic because I'm going to step out a little bit here from, and this is just conjecture based on coaches I've spoken with, players I've spoken with, high school coaches especially, kind of share this sentiment. A 3-star athlete at your average high school of 2,000 kids is probably the most athletic kid on that campus. I mean, Amari Gaynor went to my high school, for example. I know he was a 4-star, but he is by far the best football player to ever come out of my high school. And to us, we're like, yeah, he's a decent linebacker, but we wish we had better. The reason I'm saying this, Drake, is that the 3 stars and 4 stars are just as proud as the 5 stars. So if you gotta walk that line where you don't want to make the kids you could get feel like they're just your backup option with some kid that you have no chance of getting. I mean, imagine if you brought your girlfriend home for the first time and in your kitchen, you've got, a bunch of posters of all these like celebrity girls that, you idolize. It's like, A, that'd be a little weird, but B, even though she knows you don't have a chance of dating any of those girls, like that's not going to make her feel good. She's not going to want to like keep hanging out with you. It's like, come on. So if they're like, hey,
Jess would kill me.
Right. So if they're like, hey, like FSU is basically just going after every 5-star they can talk to. And, I'm just the backup, even though whatever, because they just think I'll go there no matter what. Like that's how you lose recruiting battles to other schools. And then, yeah, I mean, so that's all I have on that. But I guess I kind of echo his question with a repeat of the same question. It's like, when do you make that switch though? And I think for me, it's like, you just mentioned Drake, or who was the 5-star quarterback we had on campus this summer? He came with a 7-on team, like
Dante Moore.
Right. So you get kids like that you have no chance of landing. But if you can get those kids to start saying some good things about you, I think the transition will start to take place.
Yeah, you should at least attempt to speak to these kids and probably get them on campus just to see overall, like, hey, it's a good vibe. Hey, I have better options. Like, I think Brock Glenn was in this past weekend. The kid is probably, his recruitment's going to blow up. I know he has an Ohio State offer. And if you're a quarterback right now, you definitely go to Ohio State to follow in the footsteps of like a CJ Stroud and a Justin Fields. But I think more my concern is more like we're discussing where you still go after 3-star kids and the 4-star kids. I think it's what's more puzzling with the staff, and we can talk about this in a later day because we'll be going too deep into it now, is that their selection of who they're going after on certain positions is really just puzzling when it comes to talent-wise. I think that's more the concern, honestly, with the staff.
Agreed. I think they're being a little too conservative right now. But again, it's understandable. So I think what they're doing with the camps is the right thing. And if you can get the really good kids on campus during camp, you can use that as a way to talk to them, but like, you're not really talking to them. You just, kind of what happened with Chris Parsons. You just say,
usually
hey, man,
they bring their teammates too, who also are under the radar kids. If you don't land them, you can land their teammates.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the second part of his question is Norvell a lame duck if LSU is a blowout? Someone else left in our comments. I apologize. I should have wrote your name down that, LSU is not the end all be all. And I think that's right, because I think back to blowout losses, right? And I think of 2. One is Willie Taggart against Virginia Tech. And I think that pretty much put the nail in the coffin, like night 1. Maybe that's some confirmation bias, but it seemed to. But then think about the loss to Louisville. Was it 65-21 or something against Lamar Jackson? But then we rebounded, right? And we ended up going to an Orange Bowl and beating Michigan, and it ended up being a pretty darn good season. So I don't think he becomes a lame duck after one blowout, but I think if he got blown out by Louisville, it's going to be very quickly decided, or by LSU, it'll be very quickly decided 2 weeks later in Louisville if he's a lame duck. Because if you get blown out and then lose embarrassingly to Louisville, I think it's probably over.
Yeah, and I think overall, I don't think a blowout's going to happen against LSU, primarily because I think with Brian Kelly, that's, like I said before, it's a new staff,
Brian Kelly
new
doesn't blow anyone out ever.
Overall. Like, yeah, kinda.
It's just not a style. It's not really the type of football he coaches. It feels like.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. I think I think you're right where it comes down to that Louisville game, because Louisville is going to come not off a short week, but like I said before, John Rice Plumlee is most likely going to be the QB there. He's mobile, and going after a mobile QB does take a lot of wear and tear on a defense. If he doesn't perform well there, I mean, we saw how Alford basically fired a legacy name in the baseball team that after a regional appearance. And Mike needs to understand that if you don't perform in year 3, you might need to be finding out where you should go next. Maybe go Arizona State.
Yeah, no, that's right. But I don't. First of all, I don't think either of those things are going to happen. I'm pretty confident in this game, and that brings me to Lotto's question of why are the odds close? And I think I responded in writing, but just to add some context, it's close for 2 reasons. One, when you think of gambling, right, it's so easy to think of odds as being predictive, right? Saying, okay, these teams are 3 or 4 points apart. But unless there's some weird edge Vegas is really trying to run, their job is to get the market to get action on both sides. Because when you bet, right, you bet $110 to win 100. So Vegas always makes 10%. If they can get the betting at 50-50, they'll make a 10% vig off of that game. Now, again, they don't really like 50-50 either, because that's too conservative for them. but they respond to the market just like anyone else. If they had opened the line at 5 and everyone said, oh, I think LSU is going to win by 30, and people started hammering LSU at -5, that line would have closed. They would have reset it this early and it would have jumped. So the fact that it didn't tells you that it's the market saying, well, we don't think the game's going to go like that. And the reality is last year, one of these teams won 6 games. One of them won 5. And you have a team that has all continuity. In fact, Drake, we've been a little critical about the degree of continuity Mike Norvell has kept on his coaching staff, but you don't have a single coach on this staff that wasn't with the team last year in some capacity. I think you have 19 or 20 starters coming back from last year's team. Not that it was a great team, but you have to assume they'll improve. And then on the other side, you've got brand new coaching staff. You've got 11 guys going to the NFL in the draft. I don't know if there are PWOs on top of that, and a team that has really underperformed. So that's, I think, what people are looking at, and they're saying, hey, maybe this could be a close one, especially LSU's first game of the season.
There's a reason why the line opened up at 3.5, and it's now gone down to a full point at FSU is now +2.5 underdogs on a neutral site game, even though it's already in New Orleans. To me, that's basically, well, Max, I'm not going to belabor the point any further because Max is right. We have the continuity on our side. LSU, we have no idea who the QB is going to be. Hell, Caroline was on here last week, and she has no idea who the QB is going to be either. Under a new system, new regime, new staffs overall. I mean, their consistency is only along the defensive line, which is going to be very good, but also their offensive line has to deal with Fabian Lovett, Robert Cooper. But overall, to me, it was 3.5 because I think that was basically, we think it's going to be a closer game. And then I know we're not doing any banding advice here, but to me, I would take an FSU +3. I think that's basically would have been the sweet spot right there.
Yeah. And I'll, and before we get to the next question from Fred Petrie about what running backs do we trust, I don't know if that's how the game's going to play out, but that's just for me why the odds are close. Although we talked about this over the weekend, Drake, I think their D-line is exceptional. I mean, very, very good, possibly one of the best units in the nation. But their D-line only plays our O-line, right? They can't disrupt our D-line. And I know that's no shit, Max, but what I'm getting at is that their secondary was not very good last year and lost a lot of their talent. They have great talent, but those guys haven't proven it on the field. I think our secondary is better than their secondary right now, at least the way they've performed on the field. So when you look at our total performance as a defense or total, I guess, what they have to go against across 11, I don't know if their defense is that much more daunting because of the drop off from their front. I'll even include their whole front 7 to what they have having to cover the field vertically against an offense that really likes to spread things out, stretch the field, test the boundaries a lot, throw things out to the sideline, see what happens type of stuff. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And Drake, getting to Fred Petrie's question. Fred, we love having you here, man, our resident LSU fan. Seriously, thank you for being here. And he wants to know, what running backs do we trust on this roster? How many? Because I think we talked quite optimistically about what the running backs could be. But, like, how many of these guys do you feel like you really, like, are like a sure thing in your mind?
I hate how you said sure thing because I have blind faith in Trey Benson to be really good. But I do have trust in Treshaun Ward, for example. I do think his vision is it's really, really damn good. I think he's also his movement, his hand catch, his pass catching skills also are really well. And then Lawrance Toafili apparently is also out there gaining weight. And I think he's capable of a lot more of those plays where we saw, I think towards the Duke game 2 years ago, where I think he just cut up. I think it was like an 80-yard touchdown run. And then we had the catch with against Clemson where he basically vaulted over and was not touched down to the ground yet. So I think those two right there, I want to say Trey Benson because that's someone I actually have a lot of faith he's going to do really, really well. I just can't say I trust him yet because I've only seen him in spring practice. And I've only seen him for the spring game. I haven't seen him in a full game as of yet. And I think he had 5 carries with Oregon. So I think that's more of a blind faith thing for me.
I really don't have much to add. I'm in the same boat. I've seen it with Treshaun and I've seen flashes with Lawrance Toafili. I will say, we
got to think of a new nickname for them too. We used to have Treshaun, but now we got to think
of
we had Trey Benson for Trey Benson and Treshaun Ward.
Oh, Trey squared.
You're so lame.
Okay, fine. All right, it won't be Trey squared. You're right. That was pretty bad.
We'll do that till we find something better.
What if we call it SEAL Team 6 because Trey is 3 and 3 plus 3 is 6, and I like SEAL Team 6. Anyway, we'll workshop it. But that was bad. That was awful. I realized that.
Comments in the below.
Yeah, please don't. Just I know when that was a bad one. But Fred, to answer your question, I would say we have one running back I trust, and that's Treshaun Ward. But we also know what his ceiling is. I have one I'm very excited about, like Drake said, in Benson. And then there's one I'm confident in, and that is Lawrance Toafili if he's able to play his role. What I mean by that is, like, I don't want him to get more than like 10, 12 carries a game. Like, I want him to, be very, there. And then the last one I will say is he's not a running back, he's a receiver. But I would look for Ja'Kai Douglas. You can look up his highlights from last year. He had a couple really big plays for us to do some stuff out of the motion of the jet sweep game. I think we'll see some stuff tried there. So he's not a running back, but him involved in the run game, I do trust because he's got a pretty special skill set there.
See, that's where I think Micah Pittman's going to eat. I think Micah Pittman's going to take that Deebo Samuel kind of role. I mean, if you see the amount of times he tweets, Jordan Travis, being his QB, it's like, oh, he's going to feed him the ball a lot in that offense. So I think Micah Pittman's going to be the recipient of all those wide receiver screens and motion sweeps. Yeah,
no, possibly. But yeah, we got to get to the meat talk here, talking about Mike Martin Jr., who was let go by the athletic department and the athletic director this weekend. So before I do that, folks, I want to tell you all about some of the other great programming we have here. We don't do this a ton, but I do want to plug the Locked On Network. So we actually, when we started over, a year and a half ago, with Locked On moving from our old podcast, I think the network was getting like 200,000 listens a month or something, like 250. We're doing in the millions per month now. It's been pretty wild to watch it grow. And because of that, they've been able to start doing some specialty shows. So if y'all are big NBA fans, check out the NBA mock draft. That's going to start June 16th. We've got over 50 insiders. We've got team shows just like ours for every NBA team, plus a revolving pool of experts that are going to bring y'all a pretty awesome mock draft show and keep the coverage alive all through NBA. So just search NBA mock draft Locked On and you'll find it, and I think you'll enjoy it. All right, man, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, I suppose. But before we do that, I said it once, I'll say it again. I love y'all. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. And Drake, I'm going to take the floor for a moment because this is the hill I was willing to die on over the weekend. And I'd like to do it in person because I don't have Twitter fingers that then won't back up what I believe in. I'm always into seeing both sides of things, but once I've made my mind up, I'm happy to say, hey, here's what I think. I'm glad Meat got fired. I think it shows a couple things. I think one, it shows a new athletic director willing to put his stamp on programs proactively, right? Not wait until the contract's up and just not renew. It's kind of the passive way of doing it. He said, look, this isn't the standard. During his statement on it, this isn't the standard. We know the standard's high. We know that might be unfair, but essentially we don't care. Like, it's going to be what it is, and we're going to find someone that can perform at that level. So I think it's what had to happen. I mean, I won't even get into the Mike Martin stuff because I'll just sound mean. Y'all can check out @NolesAnonymous on Twitter. That was me. I'll take credit for it, but I don't really love a whole bunch of regular season wins and never winning a championship. I realize championships aren't everything, but the analogy I used, and share this with y'all, is like, who would you have rather been from 2001 to 2012 in football? Georgia, who won a ton of games, was always kind of in it, had Mark Richt for a lot of that, and whatever, or Oklahoma, who also won a ton of, I'm talking 01, so after their last championship, just follow me, also won a ton of games. They were kind of in it. They made the playoff. Well, I guess there wasn't playoff till 12, but you get what I'm saying. They made some of the big games, blah, 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 but they didn't win a ring. Or would you rather be Auburn? They had a few down years, a few years that really sucked. They definitely weren't on a great streak year after year after year, but they won a title in 11 or 10/11. And then they played for one again in 2013. Like, that's the team I would almost rather be. Like, I appreciated the consistency, but to me, I would have gotten rid of Mike Martin in the early 2000s because, like, he did a lot, but he just never could get over the hump. We brought his son on. We gave him 3 years. It wasn't working. And hopefully now we'll actually do a national search and bring someone on that can get us to Omaha and get us a trophy in Omaha.
Yeah, my hockey team won the President's Cup trophy this past season by 5 points to beating out the Colorado Avalanche, who are now in the Stanley Cup final. My team got eliminated in the second round, and I could care less about actually winning the President's Cup trophy with the number one offense in the league because now we just sit at home and watch our watch those damn Tampa Bay Lightning in the Stanley Cup final. And also, I know we have a lot of Braves fan listeners, and they can probably tell you since they won 195, but they can probably tell you they won, I think, a majority of the NL East division titles, and they just won their first one with an elite pitching staff for the first time in a very long time, and they would trade all that just to feel the feeling that they had last season. To me, I would trade a lot to win a championship, and I think that should be the end-all, be-all. It's really nice to win a lot during the regular season, but that, to me, holds no weight for anything. And then with Mike Martin Jr., baseball is something I watch a lot more analytically because I played it for a while, and just watching how the team responded to him, and he also was the hitting coach for a majority of his time there, and to see that was the crux or the much maligned core issue with the team for the past 2 seasons, as well as fielding, just to me shows that there should have been a change made. And overall, I think Alford, you're right, he's not afraid to showcase that. It's not a popular move. The Martins are synonymous with FSU baseball ever since Mike Martin Jr. Mike Martin was the head coach back in the 70s and 80s when he started there overall. So to me, it showcases that Alford is tired of losing. And we had Alford on here about a year ago before we joined Locked On Seminoles. Yep. He played baseball at Mississippi State. He also he wanted to play baseball at FSU. He discussed his love for the Martins there. So it wasn't the easiest decision for him to make overall, period. So hopefully now we can go after Link Jarrett, who was actually Mike Martin Jr.'s ironically his old roommate back in college when they played ball together. And right now he's got Notre Dame to potentially a super regional and potentially also to a College World Series. So that to me is the person you should go after. And if you can't land him, you should go grab Chris Hart over at NC State. So.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'm glad you brought up NC State because I wasn't really bashed on Twitter. There's a few people, but they brought up like, oh, he brought us to relevance. And that's true. I mean, he won over 2,000 games. I'm not taking that away. What I'm saying is our football program being the same football program it was in my alternate timeline here would have, in my opinion, still raised all the boats. Like they would have brought in money that went to the baseball program, and they would have created an atmosphere, an environment, and a culture that another coach probably could have also won a lot of games with and maybe gotten a couple championships. So championships aren't everything, but in the aggregate, they are to me. And I don't mind saying that. And you might think, Max, that sounds contradictory. Drake, I'm glad you asked. What I mean is I don't want us to be Auburn, right? Like Auburn football, in the sense that they keep firing head coaches that win championships like the first time they have a bad season. Because look at Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. He had a 4-win season. They stuck with him, and then he made the playoff like 2 of the next 4 years, right? That can happen as well, but you also have to be willing to do what Georgia did with Mark Richt and just say, hey, you keep getting close, but we want a cigar, and pull the ripcord, because when you look back on a decade or 2 decades, you have to have some championships in there, or it's like, okay, great. What was the point of all of it?
It's just sometimes people just aren't closers. That's why it's one of the hardest businesses in baseball right there. Not every single person has that ninth inning mentality to basically come in there and shut down. Eric Gagne had it. Mario Norvell was the best to ever do it there. I know some folks are out there. Billy Wagner, one of my personal favorites out there as well. Like not everyone is able to close. And unfortunately, neither of the Martins do that here. Well said, Drake. Well said. And folks, thank you for rocking and rolling with us on your Monday for a Mailbag Monday episode. And we hope that you keep coming back to the Locked On Network with me, Drake, and Dave at Locked On Seminoles each and every 3 days a week. I know, but guys, it's so ingrained in me. I'm going to say each and every day, but it is 3 days a week here on YouTube and on the podcast. Check it out. Thanks for being here. I'm Max. That was Drake. And this was Locked On Seminoles. Take care, everybody. Go Noles.